Chris Lee of Southeastern 14 here for a special episode today. We're going to talk some SEC football with my friend Blayne Gilmer. Blayne writes at UGAsports.com. That is part of the Rivals.com network. He does the SEC Takeover Podcast. He is a football whiz, not just Georgia, but the SEC East, the West, everything in between. Blayne, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely, Chris. I'm looking forward to being a part of this.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I know there's always an appetite for talking football. Any time of the year, we have stuck to basketball and baseball in the spring, but figured it was time to catch up on some football. You're the perfect guy to do it. We're going to focus on the East today. And, of course, everything in the East runs through Athens. Georgia has lost a ton. I think you're going to, just a hint that you're going to have a few Bulldogs pop up in the upcoming NFL draft. Probably a pretty good bet there. And so Georgia loses a lot, but Georgia has also been recruiting at a monster level, and Georgia is getting to the point where Alabama was, where you just reload with different guys. Safe to say Georgia's still the team to beat in the East, even with all the losses?
Oh, absolutely. I think Kirby Smart has built that program too. It's kind of like the old adage I use. I'm a big pro wrestling fan as well. The old school stuff. Ric Flair used to say to be the man, you got to beat the man, right? And that's what these teams are going to have to do to go. Like you said, it goes through Athens, and coming off a national championship, very much so they are the man not only in the East but in college football at this point in time. So it's going to be a different looking team, a different style of a Kirby Smart team in Athens this fall, but I definitely think they're the prohibitive favorite right now in the East.
How has winning a national title changed expectations and just the atmosphere in Athens?
Listen, I'm you know as well as I do, as being part of the Rivals boards and the message boards and stuff like that. Fans take every kind of angle, good, bad, indifferent on things. There's really been a sense of relief. I had a guy call me and say he's a big time Georgia fan. He called me and said, really, I was shocked that I wasn't more happy that Georgia won the title, but I was more relieved that they didn't lose to Alabama again. So I think it's been just kind of relief. 41 years of getting, jabbed at by other fan bases and stuff. So now all that's going on, it almost seems like Georgia's kind of playing with house money at this point from a fan perspective. I know Kirby Smart and his staff don't think that way. They're focused, and his team are focused on winning another one, but the fan base is pretty happy right now, I would venture to say.
Yeah, I think the what is the YouTube show where they do such a good job of parroting SEC people as characters? I've gone blank on
SEC Shorts.
Yeah, SEC Shorts is going to be a little short of material going into 2022, but I think they'll figure it out. Georgia was kind of the frequent butt of jokes in a good-natured way, but that's a good way to put it. It's a shame that that's where it is, that it's more really a relief than it is a joy, but that is the competitive state of the SEC right now.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it was just that being so close so many times in different ways. You look at the 2012 season, the Aaron Murray's pass gets deflected, they catch it in bounds. If Georgia beats Alabama there, it scores there and beats Alabama, they probably would have killed Notre Dame just like Alabama did that year. And then, of course, 2017, Alabama once again to a second and 26 in overtime. So I think to do it against Alabama, there was that joy there, but also because I was in Indianapolis, I was on the field, I saw everything going on. There were grown men crying, babies being thrown in the air, all kinds of stuff occurring. There was plenty of joy, but it was a sense of, okay, that's over with. They did it. That type of thing that you could feel collectively from the fan base and those involved. So I think that's kind of the deal there. But this Georgia team is going to look totally different, Chris, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit here too.
Well, what makes Georgia the team to beat, assuming that we're correct in our assumption here?
I think it's just the accumulation of talent over time. I mean, Kirby Smart has done such a good job of. I mean, he was a big part of why Alabama recruited so well while he was there. He genuinely loves recruiting. He loves being out and talking to high school football players because his background, his dad was a high school coach for such a long time. He loves the high school part of the game. He loves going to these high school games. So Kirby Smart is a relentless and genuine recruiter, and he hires all these guys, now young guys on his staff. Chidera Uzo-Duribe, who he just hired as outside linebacker coach to replace Dan Lane, is 29 years old. So he's hiring guys with a lot of energy, guys that understand that you have to recruit to be able to win at the highest level. And Georgia just is the deepest team by far in the East in terms of position by position.
Identity on both sides of the ball, does that look any different in 2022 for Georgia?
Yeah, I think in terms of Georgia's defense, their linebacker play was their identity, just the speed at the second level. Obviously, they had great guys up front in Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, but they were able to just kind of play zone in the back end, and because they knew that they were going to be able to affect the passer, and they were going to be able to play the run with five guys at the most, just drop people back, make it hard for guys to make plays. I think you're going to have to see Georgia be more aggressive on defense this year. And I know that sounds weird, but they didn't have to be as aggressive. They didn't have to manufacture pass rushes and stuff where they were just able to beat guys. I think Georgia's going to have to manufacture that pass rush a little bit more, take a little bit more chances on the back end. So I think you may see Georgia give up some more big plays this year maybe than they did last year because had the luxury of playing zone. But I also think you're going to see maybe the havoc numbers go up even a little bit more because they're going to have to be exotic with those blitzes. You got Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann taking over as co-defensive coordinators there. Schumann's been with Kirby so long. Muschamp, of course, is been well traveled. His stops are well documented. Former Georgia Bulldog himself. So I think on the defensive side, you're going to see that, and then on offense, I think you're going to see them take to the air a little bit more this year because I think they're going to have to score a little bit more than they did last year. Because last year, you get 17 points, the game's pretty much over with.
Yeah, the quarterback situation has been really delicate there for several off seasons. You just cannot recruit a bunch of 5-stars all the time and keep everybody happy. And ironically, it was a walk-on in his second trip in Athens that wins the national title. It's just one of the most unexpected scripts that you could ever write. How do you feel they handled that in the offseason?
I think that Kirby Smart came out after the press conference when Mike Griffith, who loves to bring up the quarterback question in every post-game setting, Kirby told him Stetson Bennett's our quarterback. He said, I don't even have to say it because our team knows that Stetson Bennett's the quarterback. So I think that's established. The guy helped Georgia in that 41-year drought, but they love the progress that Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff have made. And honestly, at one point it seemed like people were expecting any time for Carson Beck to be transferring out. I think Carson Beck knows that he's in a good spot at Georgia, and even if he has to play one more year behind Stetson Bennett, that he's set up that if he sticks it out, he's set up to have a really good cast around him. So going forward, so I believe that the quarterback situation is actually pretty settled. It's going to be Stetson Bennett going forward. As much as 50% or more of the Georgia fan base probably doesn't want to hear that right now, that's still the way it is. That's a very divisive thing. I don't understand how the guy who just won you a national championship could be divisive, but it is. Hey, that's SEC and SEC fan passion.
Yeah, since when was the quarterback situation not divisive? I mean, it doesn't ever matter, I don't think. But yeah, it is pretty funny the way that it played out. But all right, let's talk about a team. Well, first of all, can anybody realistically challenge Georgia? Somebody's going to finish second because you always have a second place finisher. But can somebody actually challenge Georgia to win the East?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think that this Georgia team, last year was almost infallible, right? Other than that in the SEC championship game, didn't play their best. Alabama came out and backs against the wall and just smoked them. But when it comes down to now, I don't think you're going to have that dominant. I mean, Chris, you said it yourself. They had 3 linebackers that could all realistically get drafted in the first round. This upcoming. I mean, that's just unbelievably rare talent. Plus Jordan Davis, who's 340 pounds running a 4.740. I mean, that's just unbelievable. So the amount of talent that they lose on defense by nature is going to make these games closer because Georgia's not going to be that boa constrictor that just, suffocates the life out of their opposing offenses. they're going to have to score with some people. And the schedule late in the season, where I don't remember the exact order, but I know they play a stretch of Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Kentucky. And in that stretch at Kentucky, that's a tough stretch of ball. And that's going to be something that we're going to see. I think Georgia does end up losing one regular season game this year. I think they'll win the East, but I think at some point, just the grind of that SEC is going to wear on you. And it's hard to go two regular seasons in the SEC back to back without losing a game.
Well, I've got that stretch in front of me. It is October 15th. Georgia plays Vanderbilt in Athens. Then an off date. And then here you go to finish the season. Florida, Tennessee, at Mississippi State, at Kentucky, Georgia Tech.
Yeah, the Tennessee, Mississippi State, and it's at Mississippi State, where I know that Georgia everybody should circle that one and say, oh, that should be a W. When you go in there with the cowbells ringing and you're facing Mike Leach, you never know what's going to happen. So that's a tough matchup in itself, because it's just so unique with what Mike Leach does. But then Kentucky, that's a team that I really, really like this year. I really, really like Kentucky, and you asked about second place. They would be my pick, although there are a couple other teams that would be pushing for that, I'm sure. But Kentucky is the team that I think could give Georgia the most problems, just because of the physicality and the culture of that program.
Yeah, you've got Kentucky down for 10-2 and 6-2 overall. Sometimes your second team is your second team because you think that's the best team. Sometimes you think that's the best team because of the schedule. And no knocking Kentucky. Kentucky has for years scheduled itself a 4-0 in the out-of-conference portion, which is not a bad thing to do when you're trying to build a program. I say that. I mean, Louisville is a competitive game most years, so there is that. And then Northern Illinois this year will be a tough game too. But let's face it, the teams Kentucky has in the West, Ole Miss, and I believe Mississippi State. That is correct. So, I mean, you avoid Alabama, LSU, some of those teams. How much of you having Kentucky second is you think Kentucky's that good, and how much of it is maybe Kentucky catches those teams, whereas Tennessee catches Alabama?
Oh, I agree. The schedule is one of the main reasons, and it is the talent level. I think that having Will Levis back, I saw some of the throws that Will Levis made in his spring game, and it seems like the development of Will Levis from what he was doing at Penn State, where they kind of
Yeah.
used him sparingly as a battering ram type kind of guy, to now first full year there at Kentucky. I know there's a coordinator change up there, but Scangarello, the offensive coordinator, come from the 49ers. They're still going to have that pro style type fit. And Will Levis is just a supreme competitor. People don't realize, just if there's a couple of key plays in that Georgia Kentucky game that bounced the wrong way against Kentucky. But and that was at Georgia last year, College game day. If maybe one or two of those bounces don't occur, that's a one score game in the fourth quarter. And Kentucky was not physically overwhelmed in that game either. I know they're losing a couple big guys up front that could go drafted fairly high, but I think Kentucky overall, they're returning so much on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's Oxendine, whether it's DeAndre Square, whether it's Jaquez Jones at inside linebacker. Justin Rogers has played a lot of football for them. They're bringing back Carrington Valentine, Tyrell A. John on the secondary. So those guys, we all know that Stoops can coach some defensive football. They're bringing back a lot of starters, a lot of guys who have played a lot of snaps. And then year two of Will Levis, can they put the guys around him on the outside? They went and got Javon Baker, a transfer wide receiver who ended up having to play, was forced into action for Alabama in the national championship game. So they got him. They brought in Tavion Robinson from Virginia Tech, a transfer that is really, a very shifty guy in the slot that's going to make a lot of plays. And then Dane Key showed some spark in their spring. He's a freshman, true freshman they'll be looking to make a lot of plays. So if they can surround it, they've got Will Levis and they've got Chris Rodriguez, who I believe is the best running back in the SEC overall, most complete running back coming back. And then Cavassier Smoke, kind of a thunder and lightning combo with him. Kentucky is going to be dangerous on the offensive side, and they're going to be very, very skilled on the defensive side and very experienced. So Georgia going there late in the year, that's a big opportunity for Kentucky.
Yeah, you make some good points there. Rodriguez, it's not often an SEC team gets a back of his caliber back for another year like that. He not only had he did the workhorse things, right? He had a bunch of 100-yard plus games, has had pretty good yards per carry the last couple of years, and that's always been sort of their identity. But now with Levis, like I think he's probably looking like an NFL quarterback prospect. We need to see a little bit more, but they've got a little bit of everything right there.
Yeah, there's talk out there. I with the Takeover Sports Network that I've kind of have started here since January. We've got a guy that covers the draft and is very in tune in the draft circles, and the draft stuff never stops, Chris. They're always talking about this year's draft, next year's draft. There's already talk that Will Levis could sneak his way into the late first round of next year's draft because of the how physical he is with his lower half strength, and then also his ability to fit the ball into tight windows. And man, he made some bullet throws in their spring contest up there in Lexington. So I think Kentucky is going to be, but Tennessee's going to be right there nipping at their heels. So Tennessee and Kentucky are kind of fighting for that 2 spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, Tennessee got Hendon Hooker back. I thought he had a tremendous year. Wonder how that season goes if he's the guy under center to start the season. Still don't understand what they were doing picking Joe Milton over him. I don't know if that was a recruiting promise or what it was. But anyway, he's one of the better returning quarterbacks, not just in the league, but in the country. Problem for Tennessee is that schedule, man. At Pitt, I don't know how good Pitt will be this year, but, road trip there probably won't be fun. And then, of course, in the West, you got a trip to Baton Rouge and then Alabama at home. I mean, good grief, those are the 2 matchups I don't think you want.
That you don't want those matchups, but I will say, if there was a game that I was going to pick to be at, I would want to be at that Alabama-Tennessee game upcoming, because this is going to be the first year after what Tennessee did last year. Tennessee gave Alabama all they wanted last year in Tuscaloosa. So I think they believe in Josh Heupel. They believe in what he's doing. They like Hendon Hooker. They've got Cedric Tillman back, who's their leading receiver. So that connection is going to be there between Tillman and between Hendon Hooker. Also, just some talented guys who've been around. They got Jalen Hyatt, Jimmy Callaway is going to be a guy to step up and be there. But offensive line, they should be able to protect Hooker fairly well. Darnell Wright, Jerome Carvin, all these guys have been around for a long time. Of course, they got Cooper Mays coming back, one of the Mays brothers. So it's gonna be interesting to see how Tennessee does. I do agree with you. I think that schedule is going to be a little bit tough. Believe they got to go to Athens this year as well. They had their shot at them at Knoxville last year. So, but I think Hendon Hooker, from a numbers standpoint, I know that voters a lot of times take into account the win-loss record and stuff like that, but Hendon Hooker could have a monster, like Heisman type numbers season. He's gonna put up with rushing and passing. He's gonna put up video game numbers.
Yeah, and the thing with the guy like Hooker, you get labeled either a dual threat guy where you're putting up monster rushing numbers, and that's kind of how you're thought of, and you pass too. Hooker's a guy that's been efficient passing, and he's not putting up Lamar Jackson numbers. But I think quarterbacks who rush for yards in his range and are able to move the chains on 3rd and 8 and just really screw things up when you got everything contained, I think that's really underrated. And Hendon Hooker, I mean, to a T, is that guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I want everybody, like, one point I did want to make is you mentioned Pitt early in the season. If Tennessee goes up to Pitt and they lose, don't write Tennessee off for the year, because I think Pitt could win the ACC this year. With Keaton Slovis coming in there, Pat Narduzzi has a tremendous culture built up over there. And Tennessee lost to Pitt last year at home and still went on to challenge a lot of SEC teams in some good games, including Alabama. So, but I definitely think Hendon Hooker is the type of guy who he wants to win from the pocket first. He's got that mentality, but he just so also happens to have some jets that he can turn on and escape the pocket and make some plays as well. So I agree with you. I think he fits perfectly into what Josh Heupel's going to do there. I've never seen anything like it until I was there on the field for that game. there's no way to simulate how fast Tennessee lines up and goes that tempo. So and year two of it, look out, Tennessee could cause some problems for some opposing defenses.
Now, I think the question for them, playing that style of ball, it makes defense a lot harder. He's an offensive-minded coach. The question has been for a while is like, is he going to be able to get defensive talent that has them at a, I mean, they're competitive in the SEC. That's not what I mean. But like competing with the Floridas and the Georgias year in and year out and giving Alabama a run for its money or occasionally winning that game. How do you feel that they are going to be on that side of the ball? I know they lose Alontae Taylor. That hurts, losing an NFL corner like him. But how do they reload on this side of the ball this year?
I think they really need a lot out of how is the game won now, Chris? If you can't, you can't cover everybody for forever. The wide receivers are going to get open, but you've got to be able to get that consistent pass rush. And I think they've got a guy on the edge in Tyler Barron who I thought at times was a stud last year. He just had some. Can he do it down after down, and have some consistency? Tyler Barron is there up front. Their Mike linebacker, Aaron Beasley, is a senior. Jeremy Banks at the other linebacker. So I think they're going to be very good on that edge and linebacker core. The second level of that defense is going to be very, very good. How do they hold up on the back end? Like you said, replacing some people in the secondary back there. They got Brandon Turnage, who was at Alabama, at Georgia for literally about 48 hours, and then or committed to Georgia briefly, and then thought better of it and went to Tennessee. So he's back for another year. So I think obviously Tennessee's model is going to still be outscoring people, but I think they will be markedly better on the defensive side of the ball.
Now, if you've been in a coma for about a year and you didn't know what happened at the end of last year and you look up, seeing South Carolina pegged as fourth in the East, which is where you've got them at 6-6 and 3-5, I think would be a little bit shocking for people. Of course, what's happened is Shane Bieber did a phenomenal job in turning them around the second half. They won just enough, squeaked by some wins against some mediocre teams early that gave them some confidence, and then they got some big wins late that nobody saw coming. Now they land Spencer Rattler. It's crazy how quickly Shane Beamer has changed things in just a year. And frankly, Carolina did not have a lot of talent when he got there either. To have them in that competitive position that quickly is pretty amazing.
No doubt. And Shane Beamer is he's never been a guy that's I don't think he's going to overwhelm people with knowledge of X's and O's and all that kind of stuff. Shane Beamer is a true culture guy. Like he was there under the old ball coach in Steve Spurrier. He was there for the glory days, I guess, so to speak, of South Carolina, harkening back to the Connor Shaw days and all that. He was a part of that. So I think what you're seeing now is a guy who genuinely loves Columbia, South Carolina, loves that program, enjoys being there, and now he's finding ways to add talent, influxes of talent to a roster that they were already maybe a year ahead of schedule last year. He about got knocked out with the mayonnaise in that bowl game against North Carolina. They literally I was like, man, that guy's gonna have CTE from the cooler getting brought down on his head over there. But you're talking about bringing in Spencer Rattler. Who knows how that works out? Do we get Spencer Rattler from 2020 or do we get Spencer Rattler from 2021? Austin Stogner comes in with him from Oklahoma, so he's got that Oklahoma connection from his prior, days being there under Lincoln Riley. So we'll see how all that turns out. But a player on the offensive side of the ball, Josh Vann, is a guy who in that Georgia game, Georgia blew him out. But Josh Vann was a guy that I saw Georgia couldn't really find an answer for him. I mean, he was getting open all night, had a long touchdown catch on him. So they have some weapons there. And Jaheim Bell is a heck of a tight end too. So I think it's just going to, you may have the schedule pulled up for them, but I know that it's a lot about these matchups and who they play when. Tennessee, I know they have Georgia. They're real excited about that game at Williams-Brice Stadium because that's always weird stuff happens up there when Georgia plays South Carolina. I think that's early on in the season, week 3 or 4, but they'll have that one circled. The sandstorm will be going, so we'll see what happens with South Carolina there.
Yeah, the schedule not going to be easy. At Arkansas and then Georgia, weeks 2 and 3, they get a little bit of a break with Charlotte and South Carolina State, then Kentucky, then a break, then a pretty interesting close. A&M, Missouri, at Vandy, at Florida, then Tennessee, and at Clemson. So 6-6 against that schedule would be quite an accomplishment, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where they're at right now as a program. But it's the talent in pieces is there to maybe bump that up to seven wins or so, like potentially. I think the max could be 8, the ceiling could be 8, the floor could be 4. I mean that's where you're looking at for that. That's the slot that South Carolina is in right now. But guys like Zach Pickens and Jordan Burch on the edge for them on defense. Jordan Burch was a guy that everybody in the country wanted. Georgia thought they had him up until signing day a couple years ago. So South Carolina has the talent in some areas to make some noise in the SEC East.
Next, we've got Florida at 2-6 and 5-7. I think Florida made a tremendous hire, but that culture got pretty bad in what he's taken over. You've had the quarterback issues there. Might be a tough first year rebuild for Billy Napier.
I think I'm not one to say whether it's a good hire or not yet, just because I think Billy Napier is a good coach and a good person, but I think the SEC East can make good coaches and good people. It can chew them up. I mean, you saw what happened. It's not like Will Muschamp's not a good guy and a good coach. It chewed him up. It's not like Jim McElwain is not a good guy and a good coach. It chewed him up. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Billy Napier there. But I don't think you could have asked for a worse start if you were Billy Napier with having Utah come into you. I mean, Utah is a bona fide playoff contender. In my opinion, they're going to win the Pac-12, and they should find themselves into the playoff this year. If Utah, with all they have coming back, the physicality that Whittingham's teams bring year in and year out, they were within an eyelash of beating a very good Ohio State team in the Rose Bowl last year in an epic battle. So I think Florida could start off 1-3 this year, because I think they'll lose their first 2 games at home to Utah and Kentucky, win against South Florida, and then lose to Tennessee and Knoxville.
Next, we've got Missouri at 4-8, 1-7 overall.
I'm not gonna lie, Chris. I haven't delved too much into Missouri. Once they didn't get JT Daniels, I was like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a rough spot for Missouri. Drinkowitz is trying to manufacture a lot of excitement. He got Luther Burden, a hometown guy, to stay home, but Luther Burden is scheduled to be the guy, the playmaker for him as a true freshman. And you know as well as I do, covering the SEC East, if you're relying that heavily on a true freshman, it's going to be rough stuff.
Got to have weapons around you, and their best ones headed to the NFL, I think, is probably a third down type back.
Yeah, I just think Roundtree was there for the longest time. They've had good running backs come through there, different talents, but I just don't believe that Missouri has what it takes to compete week in and week out. You saw some rough outings from them last year. Can they improve in this? I think this is year 3 for Drinkwitz now. We'll see. But usually that they say that's kind of the make or break year there. Year 3, how do you do? I think it's going to be a break year for Missouri. I just don't think it's going to turn out very well.
Well, defensively, they were just so bad, and I just wonder about his ability to get enough guys on that side of the ball to make them as competitive as they want to be.
Well, they used to, when they were going to SEC, championships for back-to-back years. When they kind of came into the SEC to start off with, you had them be able to recruit well in the Rust Belt right there, kind of through Ohio and up into Pennsylvania. You go get some guys from down south. Now the recruiting has just become so competitive, especially throughout the SEC, and then some Big 12 teams if you were Missouri, you'd like to get some guys out of the Oklahoma, Northern Texas area, all that kind of stuff. And it's just been rough sailing for Eli Drinkwitz trying to get a good foothold in the recruiting there. And then you can't blame him. it's not where Missouri's positioned right now to be able to do that.
Well, speaking of rough jobs, boy, the one Clark Lee took over in Nashville, and trust me, I've seen that up close. The culture was bad in its own way, although not in the way that Florida's was, but just those kids were so beaten down. Certainly didn't gain any confidence after losing by 20 to East Tennessee State in the opener a year ago. And I've watched them in the spring. I think they're more together, more cohesive. He's doing things to change the between the ears thing. And I liked his recruiting class. For Vanderbilt, I thought they got some athletes, but boy, that is to say that is a mountain to climb would be an understatement. I think that you'll see them get better just because under Derek Mason, I think they got to a point where they couldn't have gotten much worse. But it's going to take a couple years. They're getting faster. I've seen that, but the linemen, boy, that's a bad situation for them on both sides of the ball, and you can't do much in the SEC when you've got their material there.
And I believe one of their better offensive linemen just transferred to
Alabama.
Correct? Yeah,
left tackle.
So that's rough stuff. But I think the combination of Clark Lee and Barton Simmons at GM, I think that was about as good a move as Clark Lee could have done. Is brought in Barton Simmons, a guy who knows the recruiting landscape, right? That's what he covered. He's kind of like you and I cover recruiting for our teams. Well, he recruited it for the whole country over there with the 24/7 sports and all that kind of stuff. So Barton Simmons comes in there, and I think they're doing a really good job of trying to turn over that roster and be creative and create excitement. But it's just so difficult with the academic standards that Vanderbilt has and the different things like that. You're just on a different level. I mean, take Notre Dame and Army and Navy and all there's some elements of all of that, that are brought into Vanderbilt. I think, like you said, Vanderbilt will be much better in Clark Lee's second year. I just don't think it'll show in the win-loss record. I think it'll show in the margin of defeat, margin of victory, that kind of stuff.
Well, one thing they're going to do is they're going to recruit Georgia hard. Which I think is a good strategy because there's so many athletes down there. They're playing other competitive teams, and Georgia just can't, especially some years there's, a class that you might offer that you just can't. But because you're loaded at that position. I think that's where they stand to pick off some players. Of course, a lot of teams recruit that state, but I was impressed with what they did down there a year ago.
Well, when you talk about Georgia, one thing that makes it unique is there's a lot of private schools in the state of Georgia that are very, very good academically, but are also football powerhouses. So, and sometimes it fits, especially in the single A and double A level at Georgia, maybe guys that aren't going to go and play for a Georgia or another school like that, but hey, they're going to make it in with Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt will be happy to bring them into their program.
Yeah, I know, boy, there's so much we could talk with SEC football. You sent me more ideas for this show than I had room paper to print almost. And so we decided on this 30,000-foot view one today. Anything we missed? I feel like I almost skipped over Florida a little bit. I don't know if there's anything to circle back there on, anything worth mentioning that we didn't get to on the high points today.
Well, the main thing about Florida is I do think Anthony Richardson, the ceiling is unbelievable. Like you don't throw the word around lightly. He could be a guy that has a Cam Newton Heisman type year if everything went great for Florida. Like he's got that kind of level of talent, big arm, can really, really run, just a big young man. But I don't know if the consistency is going to be there from Anthony Richardson for Florida to be what they need to be. And they don't have a wide receiver core that has any guy that just makes you say, oh, there's our guy to go to when we need it. Justin Shorter is the most experienced there. They know what they have in Xavier Henderson. Trent Whittemore is a good quality guy, but they don't have anybody that's just, okay, here's a true number one. Here's a guy that can go separate and make a play for us. So I think we're going to see how effective Billy Napier, he's going to be the play caller there for Florida. How effective can he be scheming up ways to help Anthony Richardson have easy reads, make easy completions, but also use those legs, and then hope that he's able to withstand the pounding that comes with SEC when you decide to run the football.
Blayne, had a lot of fun doing this today. I think we're going to do a lot more of these very soon, and I look forward to it. You have done some pretty cool stuff. We talked about how you cover Georgia at Rivals, but you've also started kind of a podcast network, for a lack of a better way to put it. Tell folks what you're doing.
Yeah, the Takeover Sports Network. You can find it on YouTube, searching that, or on Twitter. You can use @TakeoverPods. TakeoverPods.com. We can find us a lot of different ways, but it's not just myself. I have an SEC show, the SEC Takeover Pod, with former Georgia standouts Noshawn Marino and Tavares King, and we cover all things SEC every Thursday night live over on our YouTube channel. And then also, as other parts of the Takeover Sports Network, I've got guys, content creators from all across the country who are banding together to kind of create a place where people, that if they want to consume college football or baseball or basketball, wherever, all across the country. I've got Big 10 shows, Big 12 shows, Pac-12, we're expanding. We do NFL coverage, MLB. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for sports, the Takeover Sports Network. And like I said, you can follow it using @TakeoverPods or go to takeoverpods.com. Thank you, Chris. Looking forward to it.